Overnight, North Carolina Senator Richard Burr became the latest Republican to be censured by his state party after voting to convict Donald Trump. GOP groups in Pennsylvania and Maine are now considering taking this step as well. In the wake of Trump's acquittal, Republicans are trying to find their political footing, while Democrats may have seen a glimpse into the future of their party and the next generation of Democratic leadership. The impeachment managers, some who were largely unknown on a national stage just 1 week ago, are getting back to their day jobs, but this time with a lot more buzz around their names, despite the fact that Trump was not convicted. One of those lawmakers, Delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, joins us now. Thank you so much for being here. You took on former President Trump on the national stage. I said it. A lot of people didn't know your name before, and now they do. You have gained trust and attention of a whole lot more people in the last week. So what do you do next?
Well, we do the same thing that we were doing during the impeachment. What people didn't see behind the scenes is that you're aware, Stephanie, that there was a markup of a budget and reconciliation. So while we were speaking on the floor, oftentimes I would go back into the conference room and have to present and have to vote on matters in markup on the committee that I'm a member of, Ways and Means. And so I think most of us are going back to our day jobs, right? We're going to continue to do the people's business in every way we can. All of us who were impeachment managers really saw it as our duty to our country. We really felt that we were in service to the country to take on the role that Nancy Pelosi was so gracious in nominating and offering to us. But at the same time, we have the continued work of our constituents. May I just say, Stephanie, I want to thank you so much for bringing up the issue of children and distance learning. Before being an impeachment manager, one of the issues that I was really championing with Abigail Spanberg and James Clyburn was not just distance learning, but those individuals, those students who don't have broadband, who aren't able to do virtual learning. What are we going to do about those students in both urban areas where people are underserved as well as rural areas? So for a lot of us, we're going to continue the work while at the same time ensuring through our democratic process and through the commission that Speaker Pelosi is putting together that what happened on January 6th doesn't happen again.
Well, let's talk about how you're going to do that with Republicans and how you read their next move. Because we've already seen Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on Saturday made a scathing speech on the Senate floor after he voted to acquit. He went after the former president, you could say even more harshly than some of your fellow impeachment managers did. Yet today he's out with an op-ed defending his decision to vote to acquit, where he wrote this: "I was as outraged as any member of Congress, but senators take our oaths. Our job wasn't to find some way, any way, to inflict a punishment. The Senate's first and foundational duty was to protect the Constitution." So he basically said Trump was guilty, but this is about the Constitution, and he didn't violate that. Do you buy any of this?
What a bunch of baloney. That's all I can say on TV right now to something like that. I mean, in the first instance, the reason we brought the trial when we did and was not earlier was because at the time that the impeachment was passed on the House side, Mitch McConnell was the majority leader, and he refused to allow the Senate to be in session for us to bring the impeachment articles over while the president was in office. As you saw, the trial only lasted a week. We would have had this done before January 20th and the inauguration. Secondly, to use a justification saying that you cannot impeach a former president when that was resolved in the first instance on the first day of the trial with a motion, and that there are so many experts on both the left and the far right who said that it was totally within the Constitution, that the founding fathers anticipated an individual leaving office at the time that they had done something horrific, resigning or walking away, and that we still were able to reach him. So just hypocrisy to justify his need to retain power.
But let's talk about the American voter, because a lot of those Republicans who voted to acquit, they don't care for President Trump. but their number one goal is to get reelected. What is your take when you hear about people like Bill Cassidy being censured by his own state, the state of Louisiana, which in 1989 didn't censure David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan? What does that tell you about many of our American voters?
It tells you something about the base of that party and what is really brewing within it. I think Donald Trump was just able to galvanize. He recognized that fear, that hatred that's within certain individuals and pulled it into himself. To be the maniacal person that we saw in the president of the United States as president number 45. And so I think there needs to be a reckoning. I've continually said that we have got to call it out. We've got to be transparent about what's happening. That's why there were certain instances where I felt it was necessary to call what they were doing race baiting and gaslighting, dog whistling. And I think that need for power far outweighs for them their constitutional oath and doing what's right. And so I'm really prayerful for individuals like Senator Cassidy, Jamie Herrera Butler, who was able to stand on her own 2 feet and say what was right, individuals who have love of country before love of office, and who potentially probably have full lives so that being a member of Congress is not the only thing they can do.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.